My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today we hear the complaints of the people of Israel. We are quite familiar with the story. When you, Lord, sent Moses to free your people, the Pharaoh wasn't very keen. About that time, the Jews came to complain to Moses, asking him to leave them alone, as if they were happy being slaves. Now, thanks to you, Lord, Moses didn't give up, and finally, your people came out of Egypt like a dog with two tails, taking with them the treasures of the Egyptians. And then they reached the Red Sea. Pharaoh, with his army, decided to chase them down and found them at the banks of the sea. Celebrations were over. Now back to panic mode. Then they went to Moses and said to him, "Were there not enough graves in Egypt, that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt?" Well, you, Lord, stopped their wailing by splitting the Red Sea in two, allowing your people to cross the sea safely and destroying the army of the Egyptians. When they saw the miracle, they started singing praises and celebrating the victory over the enemy. But their joy lasted only 3 days. For we read in the next chapter, Exodus chapter 15, that they found no water and began to complain to Moses again. Well, then you, Lord, performed another miracle, and they were tickled pink again, drinking happily. This brings us to the first reading of today's Mass, Exodus chapter 16. We read that as they crossed the desert, the whole people of Israel started complaining to Moses, saying, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then your voice, Lord, to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, in the evening twilight you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread, so that you may know that I, the Lord, am your God." And we can imagine the joy of the Israelites, as happy as a clam at high tide, to see the bread coming down from heaven and quail covering the camp. More joy and festivities. But shortly after, we hear them complaining again. Now they had bread and meat, so they asked for water. They said to Moses, "Give us water to drink. Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" This is like Groundhog Day. How easily they got used to seeing miracles. So you, Lord, made Moses strike the rock, and a spring of water flowed from there. More partying. Well, you remember the story. These complaints never end. They got used to the manna and started complaining, demanding a more balanced diet. In the book of Numbers, chapter 5, we read one of the most remarkable complaints. The sons of Israel began to wail, "Who will give us meat to eat?" They said, "We remember the fish we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, onions and garlic. Here we are wasting away, stripped of everything. There is nothing but manna here." Come on. They forgot about being slaves, but they did not forget cucumbers and melons and onions and garlic. Jesus, how easily we get used to miracles. How easily we get used to you. How patient you are with us. So the Lord said to Moses, "The Lord heard you when you wailed. If only we had meat to eat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. And you will not eat it for just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it." So they got their meat, more joy and celebrations. And when they reached the promised land, and they saw that it was occupied, for the idea was to conquer it, some explorers started describing the inhabitants as giants and monsters. We read, "Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept all night." And they murmured against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in the wilderness. Why does the Lord bring us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" Wow, this is like a broken record, like a deja vu. They complain. They get a miracle. Then they get used to it and again start complaining to you, Lord, for having forgotten and abandoned them. They could still see you in the pillar of fire and the cloud, eat manna every day, but it wasn't enough for them. Why did you bring us out of slavery to die in the desert? Well, the reading of the manna is, of course, accompanying the Gospel of the Master Day, chapter 6 of St. John, about the bread of life, the Eucharist. And it is the Eucharist, this bread that comes down from heaven, that we can also get used to. Like the people of Israel complaining that you, Lord, have abandoned them, when it was them who were abandoning you. At times people complain, "Where is God?" And they have you, Jesus, locked in the tabernacle of the nearest church. That bread for which so many Christians have given their lives throughout history, and that so many others have grown used to. It is hard to imagine that the people of Israel could see a miracle like that, bread coming down from heaven every morning for 40 years. But after a while, they were wailing, as we read in the book of Numbers. "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food." Doesn't it hurt your ears? We loathe this worthless food. What did they want? A McDonald's Happy Meal every morning or what? In the Gospel today, people had eaten the multiplied fish and bread. And when you, Jesus, now speak about the bread of life, many are no longer interested. Jesus, when I see you in that consecrated bread, without color, without taste or smell, I cannot get used to you. I cannot see this miracle and forget what you, Jesus, have done out of love for me. Not just dying and resurrecting for me, but remaining for me in a box, waiting for 20 centuries, for me to come and say, "Thank you, Jesus. I also love you, and I want to love you more." Mary and Joseph, I can't imagine you getting used to having Jesus at home every day, to listening to his voice, to seeing him day after day. Mary, my Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, may I never get used to God's greatest miracle, Jesus present in the Eucharist. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.